Hello, everyone. This is episode 81 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Join with me is Joe Meade, and today we are doing version 3 of our basketball power rankings. This episode is part 1. After you check this one out, please go on and check out part 2. So, Joe, we've got a lot of stuff on the screen now. We've got the standings, we've got our previous 2 iterations of the power rankings, and then we've got ourselves up in the top right. Now, we have had some audio issues, so we haven't done an episode in about a week or so. So we will take that time when we go through these teams to talk about what's kind of gone on for them the last week and where we have them now. These power rankings are where we think they are now. Not, if they play a little better, they could get to hear what we think they can do now. So, Joe, we've gone alphabetical order. We've gone reversed alphabetical order. Now, let's go back to alphabetical order. First up is the Illinois Fighting Illini, which have been all over the map for us, Joe, this year, and that is kind of a good example of how things have gone for the Illini. They were second in my original rankings, and they bumped up to first. They started in fifth. For you, they stayed in fifth. And, Joe, this team, at its peak, might be the best team in this league, but at its worst, might be, worse in the middle of the pack. It's been a really mixed bag for Illinois, especially over the last month. As of now, they do sit 5-4 in the Big Ten, 13-6 overall. And the last week was incredibly up and down for them. They had a home loss to USC, a 25-point loss at Indiana, and then a 21-point home loss to Maryland. So, Joe, before you tell me where you're going to put Illinois, just give me your thoughts on what's going on for Brad Underwood's ball club right now.
Earlier on in that 3-game stretch, you could kind of explain it away. Yakishonis not playing in as much of the Michigan State game, dealing with some injuries at certain points. And, you're going to have off days, especially this was a young team. Brad Underwood, even at Big Ten Media back in October, admitted that. And I don't think the expectation going into the year was for Illinois to necessarily win this conference. I think a lot of people thought they were going to be a solid to a good enough team, especially in terms of making the tournament, which I still think isn't up for as big of a debate as some people might put it. But as of late, Sean, terrible defense, allowing, particularly the Maryland game, allowing Derek Queen and Julian Reese to dominate down low, silly fouls. And I know a lot of people are going to debate about the Michigan State game. That was one of this 3-game stretch. You can't tell me that game was the reason for. You can't tell me that game is emulates how they played of late. That game they played pretty well, got some unfortunate calls, but particularly the Maryland game and then the USC game a few weeks ago, as well as like close calls at Washington this month. This team's really inconsistent, and I've given Brad Underwood the benefit of the doubt. He certainly earned it, and I'm not questioning his coaching chops or capabilities, but as of late, I'm certainly questioning these players on Illinois to see if they can get it consistent by the time we're in March.
Yeah, I missed that Michigan State in their last 4-game stretch there that I said, Joe. They're 1-3. They do have a little bit of a favorable schedule coming up with a couple teams who are in the bottom half of the standings, and that maybe they can get themselves away from the very popular middle of the pack here. There's going to be a lot of teams in between 8 and 12 wins. I still think they can get that 4th spot. Obviously, they are well back of the leaders, Michigan State, right now, and the regular season title has probably gone. But I still do think Illinois should be able to get themselves a double bye. I've got the Illini in 4th right now.
Sean, I think you're a lot more generous than I am for Illinois because I think that, to a degree, I would put them in 4th if it was to project where they could end up. Right now, I have the Illinois Fighting Illini at 8th. Their performances the last 2 games, particularly Michigan State toward the end, and that kind of showed me their capabilities in terms of closing games, which is not very high right now. And the Maryland game showed me an extreme disability to guard down low and, frankly, to run good offenses and to not rush. So give me Illinois at 8th place.
Yeah, I can't really forget what they did on the road at Oregon, what they did on the road at Indiana. I mean, they're Big Ten champions. Those were the performance of Big Ten champions. Now, Big Ten champions also don't lose thoroughly to teams lower than them in the standings at home, but they've done that too. So I think 4th is probably where I have them right now. There's a chance they win 10 in a row, and there's a chance that they continue to lose and get dragged down in the standings and in the NCAA tournament seedings. But interesting for us there. All right, Joe, up next is my Indiana Hoosiers. Again, another example of some inconsistencies. The Hoosiers are 14-6 and 5-4 overall. It's been a interesting January. They've certainly had an easier schedule. They've taken care of business where they should have. They did have that big loss at home to Illinois. They do have a couple of quad one road wins over Penn State and Ohio State, and then a couple of not so close calls on the road. But Joe, again, this is another one where Indiana could probably beat anyone when they play well, but when they have their stretches, it's bad. So why don't you go first for where you think the Hoosiers are and add anything that you see fit?
Yeah, Sean, this is a team that's put on some clunkers of late. I can't forget the Iowa massacre on that Saturday night. That was lifeless. The Illinois game somehow was even more lifeless. I thought they showed a lot of fight winning at Ohio State, who I think is another team that's going to be really interesting to rank. But then more of the same. The Northwestern game, allowing Ty Berry to single-handedly bury them, not even to get putty there. But I think this is a team that needs to get that can't find consistency. And between them and Illinois, I have a lot more faith in Underwood and that squad to find it more so than Indiana. But Sean, I'm going to give you the main floor here because this is your team. What are your overall thoughts so far and what's been most of January?
I think every result, win-loss wise, has gone the way that you would expect. Not really the margins, though. I mean, their wins, they're pretty good in close games. They usually win. They have been all right from the free throw line. It's just the losses have been not close. And the Northwestern one was a little different. It wasn't really a total outclass. Northwestern made a couple shots that they haven't really made all year, and they won the game. But, Joe, we're going to find out about the Hoosiers pretty quickly because their next 4 games are all against teams that are above them in the standings right now. It's Maryland, it's Purdue, it's Wisconsin, it's Michigan, and then UCLA is not far after that. So if Indiana can weather the storm and get 2 of those 5, I still think they'll be in a good spot bubble-wise. Again, every time I go into bracketology, I feel like that I should leave the Hoosiers out, and it's just not the situation right now. The strength of record is really good. It's in the 30s. A team in the 30s has never been left out of that. And then, again, they have 2 quad one wins, which at the time of recording is better than most bubble teams. But, Joe, they're going to have to eventually beat a team that's ahead of them in the standings. And that they need a boost to get them into that 7 range in the Big Ten, I would guess, by the end of the conference season to be comfortably in the tournament. But, Joe, right now, I think 9th is where I have the Hoosiers. I just can't. I think they are, them and one other team we'll get to later, are really the only ones that have fluctuated between the top of the league, the definite tournament teams, and the bottom of the league that can lose to anyone. And there's only one other team that I do think can fit that bill, but I'm going to go the Hoosiers in 9th right now.
John, I'm going to put Indiana in 11th. I'm a little more harsh than you. I think if they start losing close games, this is going to get really ugly.
Yep.
Because they show an incapability to compete with some of the better teams in the league. And especially when those teams are on it. Obviously, that's an easy thing to say. But Indiana has enough talent where they could hang with Illinois. They could hang with especially Iowa. And they shouldn't have to rely on praying Ty Berry not making threes to win at Northwestern. I think I'm not discrediting Northwestern, but come on. With this roster, that's a game Indiana is more than capable of winning. So I'm going to put the Hoosiers at 11th for now. I think this 4-game stretch they have coming up, I can see them going anywhere from like 3-1 in these games to 2-2, but I could easily see them going 0-4 between Maryland, Purdue, at Wisconsin, and home to Michigan. I think those are really interesting matchups individually, and should they win 2 of those 4, perhaps I rank them even higher.
And I think the Maryland game is really that important, Joe. If you win that, then you can probably go into the Wisconsin and Purdue games with a little less pressure. And then they're going to have to beat. They have enough teams at home where if they take care of business at home and maybe win 1 or 2 road games, that they'll be in. But again, you really never know. They still only have one loss at home this year. A lot of teams have been losing at home. It was by 26 points against Illinois, but still, they've got Michigan at home, they've got UCLA at home, Maryland at home. There's enough quality wins out there for the Hoosiers where if they just play a little bit better, that they should get the job done in. All right, Joe, down the list we go to the third team that starts with an I, and it is the Iowa Hawkeyes, 13-7 on the year, 4-5 in the league. And Joe, it doesn't seem to matter who wears that Iowa jersey. They always appear to be the same team. Electric offensively, less efficient than a traffic cone defensively. They have a bunch of good scores. They have a bunch of games where they look really good, and they have a bunch of games where they look really bad and they get blown out. But, Joe, Iowa's probably outside of the tournament conversation at this point.
The Big Ten tournament conversation, right?
The NCAA tournament.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah. And it just seems like they have to put together some consistent performances to get back in the picture. They haven't really done that over the course of 3 or 4 game stretch this year. And I just think it is more of the same in a bad way for Iowa and Fran McCaffrey.
Yeah, Sean, I think it's a very unfortunate situation because they're 0-6 in quad one games, and based on the net. And of those games, only one of those was close against Michigan, particularly in the conference. Blown out at Wisconsin, blown out against USC. And then the home loss to Minnesota is what really is going to seal their fate for me in terms of where I'm going to rank them. Some of the worst 2-point defense in the country, and it continues to get worse somehow. And I'm not saying Iowa's the only team in this conference that has a lingering problem that's getting worse, and we'll talk about that team later. But for now, Sean, I really, there's really not much else to say. They can play well at home. They're more than capable of winning at home. They beat Northwestern, Nebraska, Indiana, and Penn State at home, although the Penn State one got dicey at the end. And then they can't beat anyone on the road. It's very clear to me the kind of team this is. So I certainly wouldn't want to play Iowa at Carver Hawkeye, but I'd be more than happy to play them in my home arena.
To me, Joe, they seem like a team defensively where their only real way that they can win is if they turn you over because they have nothing interior-wise. And they turned over Indiana 16 times, and that's why the Hoosiers only got 60. Indiana still was 48% from 2 in that game, so that will always be there, that weakness. And you think Big Ten tournament, yeah, in a singular game, the other team doesn't really have it. Iowa does. You could see Iowa beat some good teams, but over the course of the year, I think Iowa's probably going to lose more games than they'll win the rest of the way. And why don't you rank them first this time, Joe?
Sean, I really believe they could finish here based on what I've seen from some of the other teams in this bottom in the basement cellar as well. I have Iowa in 17th in my power rankings. I think they really can play like a top half of this conference team at times, but that's only happened at home. And usually it's too much for their defense is too much for the offense to overcome, even though there are absolute scores on the team. Sanford, Freeman, you name it.
Joe, the next 3 for them are very important for me. It's a road game at Ohio State, a team that is right near them in the standings, but the Buckeyes are probably a little better in terms of NCAA tournament standing. Iowa gets that one on the road. That'll change the conversation a little bit, and then you host Purdue and you host Wisconsin. So, Joe, three games from now, Iowa could be looking great if they're able to win 2 or 3 of these, or the at-large chances could be pretty much dead if they don't get any of those. But, they have Rutgers on the road, Maryland on the road, Oregon, Illinois. They still have a ton of opportunities, but, again, I think they just sneaked their way into the Big Ten tournament. I've got them in 15th, which is the last spot that will be going to Indianapolis. But, again, it might take more wins to get to 15th than we thought a couple weeks ago, but they already have 4. You probably think 3 more wins probably gets them into the Big Ten tournament. I find it hard to believe that they won't get that when they have, a couple of the teams near the very bottom on the schedule. All right, Joe, we'll go to Maryland, perhaps the biggest upset of the year in the league in terms of the margin. Maryland Terrapins are 5-4 in the conference, 15-5 on the year. They start off pretty solid. They hit a little bit of a lull, and then last Thursday they go on the road and beat Illinois by 21. They go on the road to Assembly Hall tomorrow. Obviously, we'll know a lot more about how their season looks when that game is final. But Joe, inconsistency wise, Maryland was there, but the ceiling might be a little bit higher than we initially thought with their ability to do that against a ranked Illinois team. But what do you think about the Terps?
Just for our viewers and our listeners, whether it's Spotify or YouTube, we're recording this on January 25th. And I bring that up because I think when you look at Maryland's month of January in totality, it makes a lot of sense. Lost close in Eugene, blew out Illinois recently, beat a really solid UCLA team, beat the brakes off them, quite frankly, even though UCLA was in that stretch. The only game you can't really explain away is the Washington one. The Minnesota one, Minnesota's been playing better of late. Northwestern got unlucky there and then beat Nebraska. So with all that said, I think this is one of Kevin Willard's underrated coaching jobs, kind of similar to what it was 2 years ago. But now that the conference is so big, I think they're one of the more underrated our teams, Sean. You look at their net ranking, the analytics like this team. They're top 20 to 30 on a lot of sites. The one I use, B-Ball.net, has them at 19. And I think this is a really good team. I think they're riding Julian Reese. I think they're riding Derek Queen. I think they're using all their contributors really well. And I think they play solid enough defense where they could be in a lot of games. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't think they're going to get blown out much anymore. I say that all the time about Michigan State, who's the conference leader. But Jacoby Gillespie could contribute. Guys on the bench have started to contribute of late. Jay Young, Deshaun Harris-Smith. So with all that said, Sean, I ranked Maryland at number 5. I think they could be right up there to be a top 4 team in this conference. I think perhaps the Washington loss they're going to want back when it comes down to the end of the season, but they still have a very legitimate chance. They're currently in 5th place right now, although tied for 5th. And based on the way they played, I really think they could get to a top 4 seed in this tournament.
I think they were a little bit on the lucky side to get through that tough stretch with as many wins as they did. You know, if you're thinking about playing Nebraska and Minnesota at home, those really went down to the wire, and they were able to get those. You lose one at Washington, you lose one at Northwestern. It's just, you played with fire a little bit having all of those games close, but they still did beat UCLA handily. They went on the road and beat Illinois. That's something that Kevin Willard's Maryland teams have not done really anywhere else. He is 2-0 in Champaign, and just 3 road wins against everyone else. But the ceiling's a little higher than we thought. They're still able to win ugly. Joe, I have them just one spot below in 6th. This Maryland team is probably going to play well enough to win, to be comfortably in the tournament. Right now, I've got them on the 8 line. I think they'll probably get to the 7 with the way that they play at home. And then, they've got another great chance to pick up an impressive road win tomorrow. And if they do that, Joe, I mean, they're probably looking at top 4. With 6-4 record, a win over Illinois could potentially be a tiebreaker. A win over Indiana could potentially be a tiebreaker, but not quite there yet. Kevin Willard's teams over the years have really had some serious letdowns post-impressive games, so I just can't put them into the double bye spots yet because of that. But Reese has played better than he has last year. Queen is a serious upgrade, and then Gillespie is probably a net swap with Jameer Young from over the years, and that's why they're just a little bit better than they have been. All right, Joe, up next we've got the Michigan State Spartans. They're 8-0. They're 17-2 overall. Not really sure if there's any other place other than one that we could put them. They're able to win against the good teams. They're able to put away the bad teams. They don't really have a star, but it seems like they're well prepared to win close games. Not all of them are close, and they're, at this point, Joe, probably likely headed for a Big Ten regular season championship.
Yeah, at this point, Sean, it's theirs to lose. I think there's too many guys on this team that have to go cold, and this is Sean's credit, not mine. We haven't seen them lose in the conference yet, and what Sean's theory is it's likely going to look like a team shooting the lights out. I think it's also going to be a combination of Michigan State, like 5 of their 8 contributors, like less than 7 points because there's so many. I mean, even the game today, Jace Richardson, 20 points. I always thought he could be a Robin on this team. Today he was a Batman. Jaden Akins is the most consistent scoring threat, but now guys like Trey Holloman, Frankie Fidler, I mean, I could go on and on. Xavier Booker. They have too many guys, and Jeremy Fears too, who's one of the more consistent contributors as well. the fact they have two consistent contributors in Akins, and really three, Akins, Holloman, and Fears, along with other guys who could pop off for 15 to 20 a night. I think this team's really dangerous. I still don't think they'll go that far in March in terms of a Final Four. I think they're certainly a second weekend team. But in terms of the Big Ten shot, it's theirs to lose. And frankly, I don't think they're going to be in any real danger to lose this title unless they lose the two games they play at LA the first week of February. So give me the Michigan State Spartans in first in my power rankings. And frankly, Tom Izzo should get Big Ten Coach of the Year. The season ended today. I think he's addressed a lot of doubts about him in the offseason, and especially after the letdown they had going into last season. I really believe that Tom Izzo's done a masterful job. This might be his best coaching job since maybe the 2015 team that went to the Final Four.
Yeah, he deserves a lot of credit because there are things that Michigan State isn't very good at, but especially around the rim, they're extremely difficult to score against, which is good. You know, Booker, Carr, they have some shot blockers, but their 2-point defense is good. They don't really make a lot of threes, just 5 of 19 today against Rutgers. You take all these things into consideration, Joe, and they still have an undefeated record in the Big Ten. If they're able to fix that a little bit, that's when I think we get talking about Final Four. I agree, though. I think they're probably a Sweet 16 team at this point, but Jaden Akins goes 3 for 15 today on the road, and they win pretty easily. It's just they're the most complete team in the league, and until somebody has a really good game, they're gonna stay with 0 losses. All right, up next we've got their neighbors to the east, the Michigan Wolverines. Dusty May having a great season in year 1 in Ann Arbor, 14-5 overall, 6-2 in the conference. Joe, we've had a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to Michigan. I had them 10th, and you had them 7th in the original rankings. And then I had them 5th, and you had them 6th in our second rankings. Probably a little bit of a stock up from that moment. There's been a couple of wonky performances recently, but take it away on where your Michigan Wolverines stand.
For me, Sean, I think the last three games have been very discouraging. That being the loss on at the buzzer at Minnesota. Even though again they've looked better, we'll talk about that. Northwestern at home, where the referees really helped them and they got lucky in a way, even if you don't want to attribute it to that. And then getting like wiped off the floor within the first, actually after the first possession, I think most Michigan fans knew what kind of game it was going to be at Purdue. 20 turnovers. It really could have been a lot worse than that. Completely inept on offense. Danny Wolf's been exposed the last three games, and he kind of just looks at Vlad Golden. And teams know that, and they center in on him and dare him to pass to someone else, which he either doesn't or he makes up the wrong decision. Besides me eviscerating them, because I could have a whole hour dedicated to that, and maybe we'll do that sometime soon based on the way our Indiana video went. I think the month of January has been really good. The LA trip was a massive success. Picked up two quad one wins there. You know, still beating the bad teams at home. They've done a really good job. Not the bad teams, beating the worst teams at home. And other than the two losses, Sean, and this 3 game stretch, it's really hard to like completely tear apart their body of work for the entire year. I think it's unfair to completely abandon a team necessarily in terms of confidence. So, Sean, with all that said, the real reason I'm having them this low based on what other people think I might rank them is simply because of the turnovers. This is a team that can score and defend effectively, and they have guys that can bail them out of bad games like Vlad Golden or on Namari or Trey if they shoot well. But right now I have Michigan in sixth. The standings don't reflect that, but this is a team that can beat anyone in the conference and can easily lose to any team in the conference if they don't turn. I mean, depending on whether they turn the ball over. That's going to be the story of their season. If they turn the ball over in March of the first game, they will lose to whoever they play to. Conversely, they could go to the Elite Eight if they don't turn the ball over. So it's really the headline will be turnovers playing Michigan or lack of turnovers launch Michigan. That's how this season will be defined.
Joe, I have them just a couple spots or one spot better in 5th, and I think we have to look at it from the long term for a second. They hadn't lost in the Big Ten until that half-court shot from Dawson Garcia, and then you end up going to Mackey after Purdue kind of lays an egg and loses at home. I don't think Michigan would have ever won that game the way Purdue was locked in, but I think time to reset a little bit. You play Penn State at home on Monday. You should take care of business there and get to 7-2 and 15-5. You're still in a good spot. Double bye becomes the question now at this point for Michigan. I don't know if really the difference between the 4 and the 5 will mean a whole lot to them. It's the seed line will be picked for them before they tip at Indianapolis, and you don't really want another game unless you have to. But again, to play a 12 seed and you would think Michigan would win that 9 times out of 10. So in terms of the Wolverines, I wouldn't be too worked up if you don't get that double bye. You're still having a really good season. The flaws are there, but see if you can get Danny Wolf back on track here as we head into the second half of Big Ten play, because you still have a road win at Wisconsin. You still have a road win at UCLA. You still have a road win against
USC.
USC. Those 3 teams are playing pretty well, and Michigan's still in a really good spot bracketology-wise too. So the last 3 games may have been a little bit discouraging, but every team has a stretch like this. I think the fact you're able to get a win out of it was pretty good, and see if you can get back on track here, because February is definitely a little bit tougher schedule-wise for the Wolverines. But all right, 5th for me, 6th for you, Joe. We've got a couple more here in part 1. We're gonna go to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who looked like they were going to be the doormat of the league just a couple weeks ago, but all of a sudden, Joe, they go from 0-6 to 3-6. They're now 11-9 overall. 3 quad 1 wins in a row. They won at home against Michigan, as you mentioned earlier. They went on the road and won at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then just a couple hours ago, they took down Oregon at home. So, Joe, the way Minnesota's playing right now, you have to think that there's at least an outside chance they get to the Big Ten tournament. And Golden Gophers fans are going to be wondering, where was this all year? Because they're playing some pretty good basketball right now. And they do go to the Breslin Center next, potentially the worst place to go in the schedule. But you have to give them a little bit of credit for getting this season off the mat.
Yeah, Sean, I think they showed a lot of life even before the Michigan game, not losing by a lot to Maryland. I think that kind of awoke teams, but I think most people looked at it. Maryland's not too serious. I think they looked at it the wrong way based on all the evidence we have now. They really should be 4-5 in this conference. The Ohio State game, that was I'm not going to use profane
They gave
language.
it away. They gave it away.
That was a boneheaded way to lose a game, to put it politically correct. But Sean, ultimately, this team scoring wise is Dawson Garcia and the rest. If they can effectively slow down the other offense, which is what they've done so successfully in their 3 victories, they're going to beat anyone in this conference. If they do that, and the other teams fall for it. And unfortunately, 2 really good coaches in just Dusty May and Dana Altman fell into that trap. And maybe my theory, I'm really interested to see how they do. When they do play Washington, they go to LA in the middle of February. Maybe it's just adjusting to this new style. I think Dana Altman and Dusty hadn't seen a style like that, or certainly not accustomed to it based on their body of work. And perhaps that'll, lead to some more wins for the Gophers. But with all that said, Sean, maybe this is a little crazy, but I'm going to have Minnesota at 15th. I think they just get into the Big Ten tournament, and I think they're gonna spoil a few more teams' chances at a better seed line, or perhaps at a Big Ten title or a double bye.
The game plan, you can start to see what they've been trying to do the last couple games. They play a real slow tempo. They take high percentage shots and they don't turn the ball over. I think we see that a lot in, you think about the old Virginia teams and Villanova. They're starting to make a couple more shots, so they're not, when you're making shots, you don't want as many possessions. And it just seems like on a points per possession basis, they're meeting their game plan a little bit more here. They're rebounding the ball like crazy, out rebounding Oregon by 11 today, or 9. And I don't know how much of that game you caught, but it didn't ever seem like they were going to lose. They were getting better shots. They were rebounding Oregon's misses. And then when you have a player as good as Dawson Garcia with 31, and it was a 13 for 19 was 31 points on 19 shots. That's pretty
Yeah,
efficient.
efficient.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a chance they get there. I have them just missing out right now. I have them in 16th, but I am awfully happy that my Hoosiers do not have to see them again because there is still is not much benefit in playing them. It's
No.
still a quad 2 road game, quad 3 at home, but they might just be capable of pulling off a couple surprises like they did today. All right, Joe, we've got three more teams in part one here. We've got the Nebraska Cornhuskers, potentially the team that's trending down the most. They're 12-7 overall, 2-6. That's 17th place in the league right now. They looked like a really solid team after their early January win against UCLA, but they followed that up with 5 losses in a row, a big loss at Mackey, a big loss at Carver Hawkeye Arena, a loss on the road in College Park, which was close, and then they had 2 home losses in there also to Rutgers and USC. But Joe, the fun NBA style of isolation ball from Fred Hoiberg, which was working early on, doesn't seem like it's working the same right now. What do you think about the Huskers?
Yeah, this is close to. If it weren't Fred Hoiberg, I'd say this is a team close to going completely off the tracks. I think after that UCLA game, it's just been, gut punch after gut punch. Purdue getting absolutely massacred there, which I know a lot about, unfortunately. The Iowa game, I really thought they should have won that. And then, dropping two at home to Rutgers and USC, two teams that, frankly, at home you got to beat if you want to make the Big Ten tournament. And, they've been close to these games, but frankly, I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of their most impressive wins, particularly the Creighton game, they had to blow teams out to win. I know Indiana earlier in the year was closer than the score looked, but they had to pull away at the end, and that game was never really in doubt. I just don't think the team. I think Jawad Gary is a phenomenal player. I think they were really unfortunate to lose the USC game, but they need more from just Jawad Gary and Bryce Williams. I think it's kind of getting ridiculous. I think Connor Seaton can be the answer off the bench. I think in a lot of games he has been, but they just need more. They need more from the role players. It's as simple as that. So, Sean, with all that said, I do think Nebraska can rebound, but right now I have them 16th, just missing the Big Ten tournament.
I have them in 14th. I just think that there's enough games for them to win. They missed Burke for one game. Mia was out for one game. They're not the others aren't playing particularly well, so it's just kind of a perfect storm how they lose 5 in a row. I honestly see them losing a lot coming up, but you still have Washington. You still have a home game, some home games that you should be able to win. You still get to play Minnesota. You still get to play Iowa. So I think they'll make it, but that USC, the Rutgers game was the real one that changed things for me because, nobody really would, obviously the margin at Mackey Arena wasn't very favorable, but nobody thought they would win there. But Pinnacle Bank Arena, always a tough place to play. Well, Rutgers, a team that's near the bottom of the league, won there, and USC, who's in the bottom half, won there also. So we'll see what Fred Hoiberg can conquer up. They still got 12-7. They still got a good resume where if they do get to 8 or 9 wins, they could get into the tournament. But right now, Joe, the Big Ten tournament is what they're going to have to be worrying about because they are in danger of getting dragged into that relegation battle just to play on Wednesday. So I've got them in 14th. You've got them in 16th. Up next, we've got the Northwestern Wildcats, 3-5 in the league, 12-7 overall. Northwestern has had a pretty okay month. Wins against Maryland and Indiana, losses at Penn State, Michigan, Purdue, and then a home loss to Michigan State. Joe, this team has 4 really good players: Martinelli, Barnheiser, Leach, and Ty Berry when he's making shots. But after that, they have no depth, and that will cost them a couple times. But they have enough good players where they might be able to beat. And they still beat Illinois at home. They still might have just enough in the tank to win a couple games at home that you think they might not.
Yeah, Sean, I think they've been unfortunate in a lot of these losses too. I think they were really close to, they should have beaten Michigan, quite frankly. But they dig themselves in too many holes. Like you see when they played Michigan State at home, how many, like what the gap is when they're not shooting well. It's as simple as that. And Sean, I do think there are opportunities. I still, what holds heavy in my head is the Illinois win. They did beat Maryland too. And Maryland, say what you want about them. We did just discuss them, obviously. They're hard to beat, and you have to play well to beat them. And I think Northwestern's played well in a lot of their losses too. So I do think more wins are coming to this team. I do think Matt Nicholson will get it together at times. I hope he gets that dreadful sub 50% free throw percentage up as well. Sean, I'm not as harsh on Northwestern because I give Chris Collins the benefit of the doubt. And I do account for the fact that there's going to be some nights where those guys aren't going to miss and they'll upset somebody. So I have Northwestern in 12th place right now.
Yep, same for me. Whoops. Yep. The Tyberry is the key for me, Joe. I mean, not many teams have four good players that are that reliable. If Tyberry's making shots, and Martinelli and Barnheiser are tough matchups. Barnheiser's kind of a bigger wing that I'm not sure there are many others in the league. And then Martinelli is, he plays the four for them, but the way he handles the ball and runs offense is more like a guard. So matchup wise, they're tough to guard. And as much as Welsh Ryan is a great place for Big Ten alumni who live in Chicago to go, they do play pretty solid at home. I mean, they played pretty well against Indiana the other night and were able to win that one. So
The only game they played bad at home against was Michigan State.
and they just didn't really get off the mat, and you can't afford to fall too far behind to the Spartans. But I still think that they're probably likely to win at home against, maybe not the top four, but everybody else. And I've got them in 12th too. I think they'll win probably 8 games in the league, maybe 7, and they'll be, in that Wednesday game where they think that they'll be the home team, and they'll expect to move on. But again, you got to give Chris Collins a lot of credit. Barnheiser missed a couple games early on. They rarely get any points outside their big four. They had 2 points outside their big four against Indiana. It's just really tough, small margins for error, but they're good defensively. They run pretty good stuff most of the time. So you just have to think that they're going to find their way to 7 or 8 wins in this league.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Last team for part 1 here. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes, the football national champions, and their basketball team is going a little bit up and down. They have got a not the most flattering record. They are 11-8 on the year and 3-5 in the league, but a pretty interesting non-conference, which included some impressive wins over Texas and Kentucky, and they just knocked off Purdue at Mackey Arena a couple of days ago. So, Joe, I actually have Ohio State in the tournament field right now. They were missing Devin Royal for a game. Michi Johnson is still out. They were missing Aaron Bradshaw for a period. So it's been a really mixed bag for Ohio State, but they have a couple of the best wins in the conference, whether it was Kentucky on a neutral or at Purdue. So where do you think the Buckeyes stand as we head into the second half of the Big Ten?
I mean, you see the 11-8 record and you immediately make a flash judgment. But Sean, the 3 wins they have, particularly the Purdue one, and they really should be 5-5 in that. They should have beaten Oregon at home and they should have beaten Wisconsin. So if you want to look at the results of the games, I think that's definitely more than fair to do. But I look at the way they played. I look at the way Bruce Thornton, John Mobley Jr.'s come on a lot more as freshmen. I think they're getting enough from Bradshaw. I would like to see a little more contribution or more consistent contributions from Devin Royal because I think he's an extreme talent. But it's particularly at halftime what's impressed me the most. The Wisconsin game, they were down big at half. Easily could have won that game at the end. Purdue, they outscored by 16 in the second half to win at Mackey Arena, which, to fall behind 13 at half, as you saw, Michigan, who a lot of people consider better than Ohio State, they got down by that much and they never came out of it. It got worse and worse and worse, as opposed to Ohio State, who rallied behind that and found a way to win.
They did erase a double-digit deficit against Indiana and forced it to overtime. They just were unable to hit the last shot. The reason why their metrics are so good is they have so many close losses, the buzzer beater to Pitt, and that will come in handy if you can get enough wins. But again, Joe, I do think they're much better than their record.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jake Diebler, even in these losses, is proving to be he's the right man for the job. And I think a lot of people doubted that, but I really hope for his sake that he's putting those people to rest because I think he's certainly done a good enough job from the third-party perspective, even if it is the rival's third-party perspective. So with that, Sean, I have been 13th, and a lot of people are going to scoff at that, saying, "Oh, well, they have some very clear flaws. They don't defend well. They don't close out games well either," which is why I'm not going to completely give them the benefit of the doubt for that. But give me the Buckeyes in 13th. But I will say, of some of the teams above them right now, I have Indiana and Northwestern revealed. I think they're in a lot better position to make the tournament than two of those teams.
Yeah, they are in a good spot where if they get enough wins, they probably won't be in Dayton, even though that's where I have them right now. It's important to take advantage of a couple of their easier games and just get a couple games away from 500. Like you got Iowa at home, Penn State on the road. You do play Illinois on the road, but Maryland at home, Nebraska, Washington, Northwestern, USC, Nebraska, Indiana. Like you got to win a couple of these games, and they get to 10 wins in the league, they'll be 500 or 5 games over 500. They'll be in the tournament. But again, very inconsistent for the Buckeyes. I've got them in 10th. I think they're the other team, Joe, that like Indiana, there's a pretty big separator between the team in 8th and 9th and 10th. Again, they are capable of beating anybody as they showed against Purdue and Kentucky, but they really should have lost to Minnesota, and they could lose to anybody in the league, even at home. They do have a number of home losses. So I just threw them in the middle in 10th. I think they'll probably end up 9-11, 10-10 in the league maybe, and we'll see what happens for Ohio State. But unless you got anything else to add on the Buckeyes, we're going to wrap up part 1.
No, and I think there are. I think of the 9 teams we talked about in this episode, they have the capability to go down a lot and the capability to go up a lot. More so than any of the teams we talked about, aside from perhaps in Illinois.
But all right, thank you everybody for tuning in to part 1 of our Big Ten Version 3 Power Rankings. Please be sure to check out part 2 when it comes out, and we'll see you next time.